You probably have in your library the most controversial book ever written. Never has a book been so loved, and never has a book been so hated. It has made enemies out of friends. It's divided homes. It's been argued and debated, challenged, attacked. But millions have died for it, refused to live without it. Is it really surprising that a book which dares to claim God as its author should be controversial, and that when the evidence is in, a verdict should be demanded of every man? It is written. This is George Vandeman. Today, It Is Written presents Evidence Demands a Verdict. The war against the Bible reached its climax in the terrible events of the French Revolution, the reign of terror that followed. For centuries, you remember, the scriptures had been kept from the people. Those who dared to follow its teachings had been hunted and betrayed and tortured or martyred for their faith. They were considered outlaws, and actually a price was set on their heads. They were hunted down like wild beasts. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? They were murdered in cold blood as they knelt to pray. I suppose most horrible of all was the St. Bartholomew massacre. A bell tolled in the dead of night, and at that signal, followers of Christ were dragged from their sleep by the thousands and murdered without warning. All through France, the butchery continued until 70,000 perished in the space of just 2 months. But now suddenly the balance of power came into the hands of the people, and revolution followed. France had been drenched with the blood of martyrs. It had all been done in the name of religion. If this was religion, they reasoned, if this is what the Bible led men to do, they wanted none of it. And so it was in 1793 that the National Assembly of France outlawed both the Bible and the worship of God. Bibles were collected and burned with scorn. And in one of the ceremonies of this insane time, a dancing girl was brought before the convention and declared to be the goddess of reason. An orator took her hand and said to the assembly, "Mortals, cease to tremble before the powerless thunders of a God whom your fears have created. Acknowledge henceforth no divinity but reason. I offer you its noblest and purest image." Think of it, a prostitute. So all of France in its atheism and its vice sunk to the level of Sodom. The people were bent on revenge. Now it was not the followers of Jesus who were hunted and betrayed. There were none left. It was their persecutors who were put to death without warning and without mercy. In the very place where the martyrs of Jesus had been burned at the stake, the revolution set up its first guillotine. And one historian remarked, "The knife of the deadly machine rose and fell too slow for their work of slaughter, and long rows of captives were mowed down with grape shot. Yes, multitudes perish." Perhaps it's not so surprising, with all of this as a backdrop, that the French Voltaire, inflamed by the excesses of the perverted religion of those terrible years, boasted that within 100 years Christianity would be swept out of existence. Well, the ruin of France was complete. But the people finally saw their mistake. They realized that the persecution through the centuries had not been sanctioned by the Bible at all. Rather, it had been a sad perversion of its teachings. They saw now that their ruin had not been brought about by the Bible, but by their rejection of it. They realize now the necessity of faith in God and His Word is the foundation of all virtue and morality. And so just 3.5 years later, 3.5 years after the National Assembly had outlawed God and the Bible, it rescinded its action. By the way, I can't resist pointing out that many of the very same attitudes that led to the French Revolution are growing by leaps and bounds in our own nation. And oh God, save us from a similar fate. Well, Voltaire was wrong, wasn't he? Just 50 years after he died, the Geneva Bible Society was using his printing presses and his house to produce mountains of Bibles. Yes, one by one, the various Bible societies were formed. And today, the Bible has been read by more people and published in more languages than any other book in existence. It's been translated and retranslated and paraphrased more than any other volume in existence. In fact, between the years of 1950, friend, and 1960, there were 3,000 scholars at work on translating the Scriptures. Perhaps this is a good place to say just a word about these translations, about these versions that we're seeing more and more of these days. We use some of them on this program. They often help to make the meaning just that much more clear. On the other hand, real caution is needed in their use. For sometimes we may not be getting what the Bible writer actually said, but simply what the translator thought he meant. You see, there are two methods used in translating from the original Scriptures. One is the formal method, in which the translator tries to find the English word that comes closest to the original. The other is the dynamic method, in which the translator simply reads the original Greek and Hebrew, and then says in modern English what he thinks the Bible writer meant. Well, the result, you see, is really an interpretation, a paraphrase, or might even be called a mini commentary. It's more easily understood. It's in the language of the people. Mysteries are cleared up, particularly in the stories. Vague passages are not vague anymore, but they're not nearly so reliable, because they're definitely influenced by the translator's personal background and his own beliefs, you see. Now, all the translations are helpful for personal inspiration, but I think you can see that for serious study of the Bible, to discover what it teaches, we're safer with a translation where the formal method has been used, where there's been an attempt to stay very close to the original. So we need to use some caution, don't we, in the choice of these various translations. Now, someone may be wondering, how can we depend upon our Bible today when it's been copied and recopied so many times through the years? When we read that book, are we getting the message that God intended us to get? Yes, friend, we are. Discoveries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls are evidence that the Bible as we have it today is essentially the same as when it was first written down. True, there were long centuries when it could only be copied by hand. Yet, did you know that today there's far more uncertainty among scholars about words in the plays of Shakespeare than about words in the New Testament? And this is hardly a surprise, for careful Bible copyists, the scribes who gave their lives to this work, actually counted the paragraphs, the words, the syllables, and even the letters in full books of the Bible. Whoever counted the syllables in Shakespeare or Plato and Aristotle, then you see they found the middle letter, and as they reread and rewrote, they could tell whether a mistake was made or not. Well, a representative of the great books of the Western world was trying to sell his product to a group of Christian students. They talked for 5 minutes about his beautifully bound books, and then they talked for an hour and a half about the Bible. They talked about the perfect agreement of the Bible writers, even though it was written by 40 different men, even though its preparation spanned 1,600 years and 60 generations, even though it was written in different places, at different times, on 3 continents, and in 3 languages. And even though it touches hundreds of controversial subjects. Yet in spite of all this, there's perfect harmony, perfect agreement throughout that book. How can we account for that amazing result? Well, these young people challenged that salesman to take just 10 authors, all from one walk of life, one generation, one language, and touching only one controversial subject. What would he have? Immediately he answered, a conglomeration. Is it any wonder that 2 days later he committed his life to the Lord Jesus Christ? Friend, the war against the Bible has been unceasing, and it still is. Again and again, its funeral has been celebrated. And celebrated is the right word, but the Bible lives on. It stood against every criticism. Critics said that the Hittites, a people mentioned frequently in the Bible, never existed. But today, historians know that the Hittites were a mighty empire, stretching all the way from the Black Sea through to Damascus. Critics said that there never was a Belshazzar. You remember that's the man who saw the handwriting on the wall. But today, safe in the British Museum, and I have had it in my hand, is an ancient clay cylinder describing the man. They said Moses could not have written the first 5 books of the Bible because writing hadn't been invented in his time. And then somebody discovered the Black Stele, and it contained the laws of Hammurabi, inscribed with wedge-shaped characters. And it was written at least 300 years before the time of Moses. Well, we could go on and on. The Bible, like a blacksmith's anvil, has only broken the hammers that attacked it. One writer has said it so well, we might as well put our shoulder to the burning wheel of the sun and try to stop it on its flaming course as attempt to stop the circulation of the Bible. Listen, friend, if the Bible were only myth and legend, it would have betrayed itself before now. If it were wrong in its history or its geography, the men with a spade would have exposed it. If it were a fraud, don't worry, we'd all know about it. The Bible is different from any other book because it makes claims that are made by no other book in existence. Listen to this, 2 Timothy 3:16. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God. Quite a sweeping claim, wouldn't you say? All Scripture, not some of it, but all, inspired by God. And that's not the only place where the Bible claims for itself a divine origin. Look here, 2 Peter 1:21. Listen to this. No prophecy was ever made by an act of human will, but men moved by the Holy Spirit spoke from God. There it is. Inspired by God. That's the claim. And that claim is either true or it's untrue. We can't simply regard the Bible as a good book along with other good books, you see, for if its claims are not true, it is a book of lies. And a book of lies can't even be a good book. We don't have the option of straddling the fence, you see. Religion is too often considered something that may or may not be true. But anyway, it's comforting, people say. It's a help. It's a handy crutch. But listen, religion is no stronger and no better than the facts upon which it is based. That brings up this interesting point. Why are we so careful to separate religion from facts as if the two could never get along? We put science, which we equate with facts, over here in this pigeonhole. And then we put religion over here in that pigeonhole. For instance, astronauts land on the moon. They tell us what they see. We call that science. We call that fact. But if our technology would permit our astronauts to move deeper into space, and if they should come upon a world that answers to the description of what the Bible calls heaven, with God in presence, wouldn't that be science too? Wouldn't that be fact? Could it be that a place called heaven, with God there and the Son of God dying on a cross, and a day very soon when he'll return to this earth, could it be that all of these are simply facts that we ought to know? It may be that the word religion is our problem. Tell me, when Jesus was crucified, did only the religious people know it? No, it was just as real, just as much a fact to Pilate the Roman ruler as it was to the disciples. And just as important that Pilate make the right decision, take the right action. He discovered that. No, friend, there's no conflict between faith and facts, between faith and true science. The conflict is only in the interpretation of those facts. The old story of the two buckets in the well perfectly illustrates how there can be opposite reactions to the same facts. One bucket, you remember, complained, "No matter how full I come up, I always go down empty." And the other said, happily, "No matter how empty I go down, I always come up full." Same facts, different interpretation. And yet there are those who want to avoid the facts, who don't want to know. They would rather not know what the Bible says. They rationalize, what you don't know won't hurt you. But aren't we too enlightened for such reasoning? There was a day when surgeons wore overalls in the operating room because no sensible man would want to get his good clothes blood-stained. But what they didn't know cost uncounted lives. There are times when ignorance is tragedy, when ignorance is sin. But is a man to blame if he cannot believe? Yes, sometimes. He's at fault if he refuses to expose himself to truth. He's at fault if he deliberately chooses a negative response regardless of reality. Oh, friend, doubt is often more a matter of the emotions than of the intellect. Would you believe it? In fact, I wonder if anyone ever rejects truth on purely philosophical grounds. A man may say he has an intellectual problem. He has a problem with Jonah the whale, or creation in just a short period of time, or something or other. But usually it is really a moral problem. He has a pet sin somewhere, something he doesn't want to give up. That's why Jesus said over here, as John, his favorite disciple, you remember, John 3, verse 19, describes it. This is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. Oh, friend, would you listen to this amazing confession from Aldous Huxley, the famed unbeliever. He said, I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning, consequently assumed that it had none. He continues, the philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with a problem of pure metaphysics. He is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to do. What a confession. Doubt is seldom intellectual. It's usually moral. Men want to do what they want to do, and sometimes they hide behind some respectable question that makes them appear intellectual rather than willful. Oh, friend, you see, so much depends on the spirit, the motives, the attitudes that are brought to the study of this wonderful book. If it's approached as if it were some sort of encyclopedia of religious information, you know, a rabbit's foot to have around, you have it there no matter how much dust it is right there on your living room shelf. Listen, friend, a collection of interesting facts, such as a king who had an iron bedstead, or how many different musical instruments are mentioned in the Old Testament, it wouldn't do much for you. Playing Bible games cannot save. It's not long ago that the author of a certain best-selling paperback, In a Flight of Optimism, envisioned a time when the whole earth would be covered about 2 feet deep in copies of his book. Well, he liked to fly high. But listen, you could be standing in 2 feet deep of Bibles and never know what it's all about. Because down beneath all the information, all the doctrine, all the history, all the teaching is a heart that is beating, and you have to get to that heart. The heart of the Bible is a man. You can't even read the first 3 chapters without encountering the man. Jesus is the heart of the book. It points forward to him and back to him and straight to him. He's what makes the Bible different. He's what makes it live. Without a living Christ, that would be a dead book. But Jesus is there all through it. No wonder Dr. J.B. Phillips said as he translated the letters of the Apostle Paul, the New Testament, he said he felt like an electrician rewiring an old house without being able to turn the mains off. Isn't that remarkable? Jesus said as he prayed, "Thy word is truth." But he also said, "I am the truth." So Jesus is the truth. And the Apostle John called Jesus the Word. Remember? He said, "The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us." The Word was made flesh. And of course, he was speaking of Jesus. Here is no contradiction. Jesus is the truth. His Word is truth, and Jesus is the Word. Evidently, we can't separate Jesus from the truth, or the truth from Jesus. We can't really discover saving truth without discovering Jesus. And we can't reject truth without rejecting Jesus. The Word, the Bible, is the written expression of the character of God. It is God spelling himself out. And Jesus is the Word made up into a life so we can see how it works. No wonder he's called the Word. And so we all need to study the Bible. Not simply to discover information, but to discover a man who can change us, and who doesn't need to be changed. Jesus said, "Search the Scriptures, for they are they that testify of me." Those who have been most deeply changed by the book have found in it more than information, more than greatness, more than power that causes us to shield our eyes with awe and wonder. They found a personal relationship with a God. I think of the boy David as a teenager out there at night with his sheep, lying on his back on the ground looking up at the stars, thinking about the greatness of a God who made the worlds, wondering how God could ever notice him, just a boy so far away. But David discovered that the God beyond the stars, the God of such infinite power, was also willing to be his own personal shepherd. He was willing to care for him just as David cared for his sheep. I've been intrigued by a book entitled David, written by Dr. John Herkes. All through that interesting book, he tries to discover what makes David tick. What is there about David that makes him so special to God? For there's no denying that the relationship between God and David was something out of the ordinary. In the last chapter, Dr. Herkes, with his gift of imagination, goes back to the hills above Bethlehem where he finds David minding the sheep. The boy's cautious at first as a stranger appeared, and then he begins to talk about his sheep. "There's one over there that limps. Did it fall over a cliff?" "No, a lion caught it." "What happened to the lion?" "He killed it." "How?" "With his sling." Well, the visitor wants him to demonstrate. He says, "Look, you see that bit of wood floating down the current by the bank over there? Could you hit that?" The question is hardly out of his mouth when, flick, that piece of wood leaps out of the water as a stone hits it. David hits it again and again, 3 times in scarcely as many seconds. "David, your sheep are safe enough, but what about you? Who looks after you?" "The Lord looks after me," he says. "He's my shepherd." "Yes, but life can be very difficult. It can be very dangerous. Can you be sure that God will stand by you, see you through? Can God protect you from your enemies?" And David says, "I'm not scared. Not with God beside me. I don't care if he leads me through the most dangerous experiences you can think of. He'll still be with me. And if I can look after my sheep with my crook and my slingshot, think of what protection God will give me as he guards me with his weapons. I'm not afraid a bit, not with God." Do you begin to see what God saw in David? What David saw in God? Do you see why their relationship was something special? Is it any wonder that the Psalms of David, all through the centuries, have spoken to the heart? You too, as you open that book, can find there not only a God of power and wisdom, but a loving shepherd, a personal shepherd, a shepherd willing to die for his sheep. And you can say with the book in your hand, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Shall we pray? Loving Father, dear shepherd, who of us today, however bold the exterior, does not need the assistance of that kind of a God? Deep down in these hearts of ours, we cry out for understanding and love, for protection and care, Thank God for the man in the book. In his name we ask it. Amen.